The government created a wall around the city, placing unemployed people outside the wall, while only the elite class remains inside the city. The poor people outside face illness and a lack of water. Watch the video till the end. In the near future, the economy is in such bad shape that only 20% of the people have jobs, while the rest live in extreme poverty. To control the situation, the government builds a massive wall through the city. Those who are unemployed, known as the jobless, are forced to live outside the wall in a place called the zone on the other side of the wall. The people with jobs, called the actives, live in a wealthy, secure city. A heavily armed group of guards protects this wall day and night. 30 years after the wall's construction, conditions in the zone are terrible. Many people suffer from untreated diseases, and clean water is almost impossible to find. In the zone, a boy named Noah is searching for clean water. He tries to steal water from a girl who is asleep. When she wakes up, Noah's mother, Izia, shows up and threatens the girl with a knife, forcing her to drop the bottle. Suddenly, an announcement appears on the screens along the wall. The government promises that jobs will soon be available for everyone, but the people in the zone find it hard to trust such news. Meanwhile, on the other side of the wall, a man named Ruben and his wife Taze are getting ready for work at Aquaville, the city's only water company. Their daughter Mail is getting dressed, but she's not following the city's strict clothing rules, so Ruben scolds her, reminding her to be careful to avoid getting fined. He also urges her to practice her speech exercises because she is mute and already seen as different, making her need to work harder to fit in. When Ruben and Taze arrive at the office, they learn that the Minister of Labor, Monroe, is finally being released after being held hostage for a year by rebels. The government has made a deal with the rebels, and for the first time in 10 years, the Prime Minister, Nadia, visits the zone to deliver a speech about the agreement. Her speech sounds insincere as she talks about equality. She explains that in exchange for Monroe's release, 10,000 people from the zone will be given jobs in the city through the Solidarity Job program. The zoners are happy to hear this news, but the actives are concerned because they view the zoners in a negative light. After the speech, Monroe is freed by the rebels, and he is reunited with his wife, Nadia. In private, Nadia asks him to tell the public that he was treated well. Monroe follows her orders and says he's okay, but once they are alone in their car, it's revealed that he is missing 2 fingers. Monroe is surprised that Nadia agreed to the deal because she despises the zoners, but she explains that she had no choice. Monroe's kidnapping had caused a big international scandal, and the World Bank threatened to stop giving the government loans if they didn't address the situation. Back at home, Monroe receives prosthetic fingers, and his daughter Zoe advises him not to answer any questions yet because his stress will affect his responses. In the zone, Noah attends a class led by Mr. Robinson, who warns the students about the dangers of Cityscut, an illegal drug that some people take because clean water is so scarce. Robinson teaches them that people shouldn't have to work just to prove their worth. But Noah believes that work equals freedom and talks about his father, who won the lottery 13 years ago and now lives happily in southern Europe. After class, Noah catches a girl named Valley stealing from the school's kitchen, but she manages to escape through a window. At the wall, zoners are being interviewed to see who qualifies for the Solidarity Job program. If someone appears sick from drinking contaminated water, they're immediately rejected. Izia goes to an interview with 2 other women. One of them gets kicked out because she smells of anxiety. As there's only one job spot left, Izia lies, accusing the other woman of being a drug addict. This lie secures Izia the job. Before she's allowed to enter the city, Izia is given a tattooed code on her wrist. Meanwhile, at Aquaville, Taze is struggling at her job, and she's already received 6 warnings for making mistakes. This only increases her stress. At the same time, Ruben is shocked when he discovers that his boss has died from overworking. Instead of grieving, Ruben immediately calls his father, Silas, who holds a high position in the company, and tells him that he wants to apply for the now vacant position. Silas is very sick and unable to afford proper medical care, but Ruben is unaware of his condition. Silas agrees to help Ruben, hoping his son can support him financially when he can no longer work. Later, Taze meets with Hans. Together, they're plotting to steal important data from Aquaville, which they plan to sell for a large sum of money so they can escape the country and start a new life. Taze has been struggling to get close to Silas, even though they are family. While she's trying to find a way, a guard catches them and tries to arrest them, but Hans quickly knocks the guard out. Taze returns to her work, but she keeps making mistakes and worries that if she continues like this, she'll be sent to the zone. At the same time, Gene, the head of security, is interrogating Monroe. Monroe shares how bad his situation was and even talks about being tortured. He assures Gene that he never revealed any state secrets to the rebels. After the interrogation, Nadia tells Monroe to get back to work, but allows him some breaks for medical treatment. Monroe insists he's capable, but Zoe, a colleague, is worried it's too soon and might harm his health. While Monroe is giving a propaganda-filled speech, Ruben and Taze get into an argument. Ruben is desperate for a promotion so he can send their autistic child, Mail, to the Phoenix Academy, but Taze doesn't believe Silas will help. She tells Ruben that Mail will never succeed and that they should have abandoned her. Mail overhears this and runs to her room for comfort, seeking solace in her talking doll. Ruben follows her to comfort her and gives her a taser for protection. Meanwhile, Jeff informs his wife, Lisbeth, that he has been selected for something, but she is suspicious and doesn't want him to go. Later, Ruben meets Silas, who reveals that he has been cleaning up Mail's profile. Silas also secures Ruben an invitation to a ministerial party, where Ruben is expected to announce his candidacy for director. Silas stresses that Ruben must present a good family image at at the event. Elsewhere, Hans secretly meets with Jean, and it's revealed that they are working with the rebels from the zone. They are planning to expose Aquaville, Nadia's biggest financial supporter. Hans and Jean agree that Taze will steal information from Silas' office the next day and meet with the rebels later. Hans is then taken through a secret tunnel to meet with Boris and join the rebels. The next day, zoners are transported into the city by bus and are warned that they must stay only at their workplaces and are not allowed to wander the city. Igia, a zoner, is assigned to work at Ruben's house. Taze rudely shuts the door in her face, but Ruben lets her in, instructing her to tidy up Mail's toys but not interact with Mail. Mail, however, refuses to let go of her doll. Izia feels bad when Ruben forcefully takes it from Mail. Later, when Izia finds a box she doesn't know how to open, she asks Mail for help. Mail, almost tasering her, eventually helps after Izia speaks gently to her. Izia then puts away the toys, hiding Mail's doll under a blanket. When a special team comes to pick up the toys, they spit on Izia, accusing zoners of stealing their jobs. Meanwhile, Jeff is sent to a government building as Nadia believes he will be the perfect face for their propaganda. He appears on television, expressing happiness and praising the government for the success of the program. However, despite his words, Jeff is not allowed to touch anything and is kept in a separate area for zoners. Still, he manages to steal a bottle of perfume. At Aquaville, Taze attempts to visit Silas to access his computer, but a guard stops her because they are investigating Hans and she must give a statement. Back at home, Ruben is getting anxious because Taze hasn't returned and isn't answering his calls. Desperate to look good at the ministerial party, Ruben decides that Izia, who looks similar to Taze, will take her place at the event. Fearing for her job, Izia agrees, and Ruben gives her Taze clothes and a bracelet to cover up her zoner number. At Nadia's house, the family discusses how many actives believe that zoners are stealing their jobs and refuse to interact with them. There have already been 22 incidents of aggression against zoners. Nadia tells everyone that they'll need to adjust for the sake of public relations. At a party, Izia is feeling extremely nervous, but fortunately, the wives aren't expected to say much, so the higher-ups still form a good impression of the group. Ruben forces Izia to dance with him, but she can't handle the pressure and storms off. As she walks down the corridor, she sees the other kids mocking Mail for being mute, which makes her scream in frustration. Out of nowhere, Silas arrives and leads her away. When the family regroups, Silas reveals he knows that Taze has been swapped with a replacement and scolds Ruben for having such a weak family. Meanwhile, Izia shows Noah the money she's earned, and they stash their savings inside a secret box. Elsewhere, Taze is finally freed and heads out to meet with Hans, but instead, she finds Jean. Taze admits that she has failed her mission, and when Jean becomes too aggressive, she starts to panic and demands to see Hans. In response, Jean knocks her out and takes her to the zone so Boris can hide her as well. The next day, Ruben realizes that Taze is gone for good and asks Izia to take over his wife's duties at work. He even teaches her how to operate the system. At first, Izia refuses, but after realizing she can demand a much higher pay, she agrees, and Ruben accepts her conditions. Once at the office, Ruben is accepted as one of the candidates for the director position. Izia is feeling anxious and makes several mistakes on the computer, but her fear of being caught helps her focus, and she eventually gets better at the job. During lunch, she struggles to open her food box, but manages after overhearing a colleague discussing the numerous people who have died at the company that year. However, because she takes too long to eat, her food is taken away when the break ends, forcing her to return to work on an empty stomach. Meanwhile, Jeff meets with Nadia and her family, and he is offered the role of Monroe's special advisor. They want him to help ensure the success of their program and reduce the rising tensions in the city, so they quickly arrange for him to appear on television. Monroe acts friendly in front of the cameras, but when they are alone, he loses his temper and nearly chokes Jeff, only stopping when Zoe interrupts them. Later that evening, during dinner, Zoe tries to warn Nadia about Monroe's declining mental health, but Nadia silences her, threatening to fire her if she speaks up again. In the zone, Noah helps Robinson with some old newspapers and stumbles upon an article about the lottery winner, making him realize that Izia has been lying to him about his father. Upset, he wanders around until Valley trips him. Sensing his distress, Valley invites him to join her for some Cityscut, but the substance makes Noah feel sick. Meanwhile, in the rebels' hideout, Hans visits Taze and admits that he has been using her to get closer to Silas, as he believes in the rights of the zoners. Hans believes that Taze thinks the zoners deserve to be in the situation they are in, so he decides to leave her in the cell. Later, Taze is given 2 bottles of water, and she has to guess which one hasn't been poisoned. That afternoon, a guard takes Izia away because an employee identified her as Hans' friend, and he is still under investigation. Fortunately, Jean uses her powers to help Izia escape, directing attention away from her and onto other women. When Izia leaves work, Jean follows her to figure out what's happening and quickly calls Boris to update him on the situation. They agree to try and convince Izia to help them with their plans. When Izia returns home, she realizes that Noah is missing and begins searching everywhere for him. During her search, she runs into Boris, who reveals that he is Noah's father. He admits that he abandoned their family to join the rebels. Boris asks Izia for her help, but she refuses to get involved. Shortly after, Izia finds out that Noah is at Robinson's house. Robinson is able to make a broth that helps Noah expel the Cityscut from his body and feel better. Izia then tells Robinson that she has taken over Taze's position and plans to use the money to leave the zone with Noah. However, when she returns home, she finds that her savings have been stolen by the rebels. Meanwhile, Ruben is called in to check on Silas, who has been feeling unwell. Ruben is devastated when he learns about Silas' illness and realizes that his father doesn't believe in him, he's just using him. The next morning, it is revealed that Monroe relies on a lot of medication just to function. During breakfast, Nadia informs him that a zoner has killed his employer, and they need to cover it up. Back at the rebel hideout, Izia is forced to cooperate with the rebels in exchange for getting her money back. They give her a chip and instruct her to insert it into Silas' computer later. later, Hans finds out that Thais hasn't drunk any water for 2 days and accuses the rebels of torturing her, but his complaints are ignored. He secretly gives Thais some water, but after seeing her terrible condition, Hans decides to kill her to end her suffering. In a quavel, an employee bumps into Ija, and she suddenly finds the chip in her hand. Meanwhile, Ruben is put through a tough interview with trick questions designed to test if he's normal. He is even asked to fire one of his friends to prove that his loyalty to the company comes before personal relationships. During lunch, Ija attempts to enter Silas' office but runs into the CEO, Bartholomew. He forces her into his office and takes advantage of her, promising to promote Ruben in return. At the same time, Jeff is called to Nadia's office because some zoners were seen wandering around and playing soccer. Jeff explains that they weren't trying to escape but were just passing time after finishing their jobs. However, the ministers aren't happy and send Jeff and Monroe to deal with the situation. When they arrive, Jeff tries to calmly explain to the zoners that they could lose their jobs if they don't return to work. But the zoners respond by kicking a soccer ball through Monroe's car window and calling Jeff a snitch. Just then, an alarm goes off, causing the zoners to scatter, and when Jeff returns to the car, he finds Monroe missing. Later, Jeff tells Lisbeth about what happened, and they get into an argument because Lisbeth believes he's on the wrong side. Meanwhile, Noah begins spending a lot of time with Valley, and the two decide to sneak into the city through a hidden tunnel. However, as soon as they reach the streets, the police spot them and open fire. Valley quickly retreats to the tunnel, but Noah ends up wandering the city alone. Eventually, he makes his way to Ruben's house to search for his mother, where Mael confronts him with a taser. Outside, Ruben and Isia arrive by car, and Isia explains what happened with Bartholomew. Ruben isn't surprised and tells her it's common for wives to act this way to help their husbands succeed. When they enter the house, they find Noah, and at the same time, the TV shows a warning about a zoner infiltration. Feeling bad for Isia, Ruben offers to drive her and Noah to the wall. Along the way, they are stopped by guards, but Ruben lies, saying Isia is his servant and Noah is his daughter. After dropping Noah at the tunnel, Ruben apologizes for everything and explains he desperately wants a promotion because of his daughter's situation. This makes Isia understand him better. Back at home, Noah accuses Isia of selling herself to Ruben. Furious, Isia slaps him and demands to know what's wrong. Noah confronts her about lying, and Isia explains how Boris abandoned them because of his activism, but Noah is still upset with her. The next day, Monroe unexpectedly appears on TV without Nadia's permission. He goes on a rant about the zoners and mute kids, claiming an invasion is inevitable. Meanwhile, in the zone, Hans receives a call from Jean, who urges him to act quickly before Monroe's speech causes more trouble for the program. Hans meets with the leader Sol, who turns out to be Robinson, and they start planning an invasion, but they'll need information from Isia first. Later, Monroe is taken to a psychologist and placed under constant surveillance. Nadia seeks advice from her father, Passeron, who was once prime minister and responsible for building the wall. He believed it was necessary to maintain order. Soon after, Nadia learns from Zoe that Monroe's speech has caused chaos in the city, with many people firing or killing their zoners. Nadia instructs her to make an announcement discrediting Monroe's claims and warning that anyone who fires their zoner will be punished. At a quavel, Ruben visits one of his opponents and finds him dead in his office. During lunch, Isia is approached by Moy, another of Ruben's opponents. Moy proposes to Isia, suggesting they marry to take down Ruben together, but Isia refuses. When her sleeve slips, Moy notices Isia's zoner mark. Panicked, Isia calls Ruben to warn him. Ruben rushes to the parking lot to confront Moy, and when she refuses to keep a secret, he beats her to death. Ruben then calls Silas, who quickly handles the body. Later, Ruben sees on security cameras that a special team is trying to take a doll from Mael. He rushes out of work, but Mael bites the man and hides in her room, forcing him to leave without the now broken doll. Isia arrives shortly after and comforts Mael, showing her how to fix the doll with some thread. By the time Ruben gets home, a guard is at the door, but when they go inside, Isia has already changed, and the guard leaves. Ruben then breaks down and confesses to killing Moy. Meanwhile, Nadia asks Jeff to create a video about how much his life has improved because of the program and to include Lisbeth in it. Knowing his wife won't cooperate, Jeff hides a camera on the shelves at home. That evening, Nadia discovers a large crowd of citizens protesting the program outside the government building. After sending guards to disperse them, she tries to talk to Monroe, but he remains cold and distant. The next day, Jeff realizes people in the zone hate him too, as they insult him on the streets. Isia finds out that Noah has been staying with Valley and goes to find him, but Noah refuses to return home. At the government office, Jeff arrives late, having been beaten up by his haters. Ruben volunteers to take Isia to the wall, and during the trip, Silas uses the opportunity to make a secret phone call. While driving, Ruben proposes to Isia, asking her to become his permanent wife, but she declines. Upset by her refusal, Ruben arranges things so that it seems like Isia was fired instead of leaving on her own terms. When Isia crosses the wall, Silas' men capture her. They humiliate her in an attempt to make her talk. Isia eventually tells them about a chip she lost, and Silas, seeing an opportunity, plans to use her to trap the rebels. He sends her to the location where she was supposed to deliver the chip, and when Jean arrives, Silas' men arrest her. Isia tries to escape but is quickly caught again. Back in the city, Ruben is forced to destroy a doll to make Mael leave her room. He takes her to a special academy for a test, but Mael refuses to cooperate, instead breaking a tablet and running off. Ruben chases after her, yelling, but his efforts are in vain. Meanwhile, Jeff finishes recording a new speech and goes to find Monroe to show him, only to discover the minister dead in a pool. At that moment, Zoe arrives and shoots Jeff as part of a larger plan. Nadia then appears on television, announcing that Jeff killed Monroe and was shot by guards while trying to escape. She uses this moment to go on a tirade against the zoners, declaring them dangerous and suspending their program. She also announces mass raids to catch rebels. In the zone, a furious Lisbeth throws stones at the screen in response. Izia, meanwhile, is imprisoned alongside Jean, who has been severely tortured and burned for information. Silas informs Bartholomew about his findings, and after relaying the news to Nadia, Bartholomew tells Silas that Ruben has been selected for the director position. At the rebel headquarters, Hans pushes for a rescue mission for Izia and Jean, but Sol refuses, stating he cannot risk the activist network for just 2 people. Noah and Valley overhear this conversation and, disgusted by the rebels' disregard for their own, decide to leave. At Aquaville, Ruben receives the director's office and Bartholomew tells him that arrangements have been made for Mail to be accepted into the academy. Later, an employee drops by with a small trinket, saying Ruben's wife must have dropped it. Ruben examines it closely and discovers it's the missing chip. Connecting it to his computer, he learns the truth about the poisoned water. Horrified, he anonymously uploads the information, and both the government and the rebels see it. Nadia quickly appears on television, dismissing the information as fake, but the zone residents retaliate by stoning their screens. Ruben rushes home to get Mail, telling her that they'll find Izia and escape together. As they cross the wall, they are attacked by Valley, but they spare him after he reveals he wants to see Izia too. Noah explains the situation to them, and just then, a bomb explodes nearby. Ruben orders the teens to hide with Mail while he goes to rescue Izia, taking Valley's taser with him. Meanwhile, the rebels finally launch an invasion from multiple directions. Nadia's defense strategies fail because not only are zoners involved, but many people from the city have quit their jobs to support the rebellion. Sol's first objective is to take over the television network, but Boris leads a group, including Hans, to confront the guards and demand information about Izia. At the same time, Ruben corners Silas at his office and beats him until Silas agrees to take him to Izia. As they leave, they're spotted by another employee, just as the TV announces that Ruben is a wanted man, having been traced to the leak. Armed guards soon surround them, leading to Ruben's arrest, and he is locked up with Izia. Within a few hours, the wall comes crashing down, and thousands of zoners flood into the city. A bomb goes off near Zoe's car, forcing the guards to evacuate her. Near the wall, the teens and Mail, terrified by the chaos, seek refuge in an empty apartment. Noah is wounded in the shoulder, and Mail suggests they make a blood pact, vowing to stay together until the end. At the minister's residence, Zoe finds her mother watching the walls fall from the rooftop and blames her for everything. Zoe refuses to leave the city, swearing she will testify against Nadia to see her downfall. Back in prison, the guards receive orders to kill the prisoners. Ruben is shot immediately, but before they can harm Izia, Boris arrives and kills the guard. The rebels then take Ruben and Izia to safety. At the same time, Sol and his men capture Nadia and kill her behind closed doors. Afterwards, Zoe approaches Sol and offers to use her experience to help him run the country. 3 days later, the TV reports that Nadia took her own life, signaling the beginning of a new era. Hans is devastated to learn that Jean died and instructs his men to identify every fallen warrior, ensuring none die in anonymity. Lisbeth crosses the wall through one of the new openings to collect Jeff's ashes, intending to honor him. Ruben recovers in the hospital with Mail by his side, and Izia reunites with Noah. Boris visits them, and Izia forces him to confess the truth to Noah, but the atmosphere remains tense between them. When Ruben is well enough, Izia tells him she's ready to be his wife. Noah is happy about the news and invites Valley to join them, but she declines. Later, at a press conference, Sol announces the end of the old system and the beginning of a new, more equal one. Afterward, he visits Passeron, who has been ill since Nadia's death. It's then revealed that Sol is Passeron's son, who was exiled from the city for opposing his father's system. Sol promises to provide Passeron with the best medical care so he can live and suffer under the new system, just as the zoners suffered under his rule. To Passeron's shock, Nadia appears alive and well, having agreed to collaborate with her brother. Subscribe for popcorn. We are racing towards 500 subscribers.